Well, very, very happy to have Chris Wheeler join us, longtime voice of Philadelphia Philly baseball and a big part of Philadelphia sports broadcasting. And Chris, I don't know about going back to buy some in that era, but of all the people I know, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think you actually did more games, radio and television, than any Philly broadcaster. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I may have done. It's funny. You know me, I never thought about that stuff too much, but I guess somebody will figure it out someday. Harry did so many of them too between 71 and then when he passed away in 2009. So I probably did. When you get right down to it, because Byron went back and forth with teams back in those days. They do the Phillies and the A's and all that sort of stuff. So
right.
I did a lot of them. I saw
I'll tell you, we had a lot of fun over those years because you guys made a great team. You mentioned Harry a second ago, and everybody understands Harry Callison, what he did not only football-wise but baseball-wise. And Andy Musser always did an outstanding job, and he came in from San Diego. In fact, I think he were on the intricate parts of bringing Andy in from San Diego and introducing me to Bill Giles. And then the team just grew a little bit from there. Whitey was always there. I think Putt started in 1950 when he joined the Phillies.
He was Rookie of the Year in '48. He was with the Phillies all those years. He had an amazing career, Don, as you well know, from being around him for so long and what a character he was. But his career was incredible when you think about it. He had two of them. He had a Hall of Fame career as a baseball player in Philadelphia, and then a Hall of Fame career as a broadcaster, even though he did not win that Ford Frick Award. In many ways, he was also one of the guys that could have won that thing. So this is a guy who had two different careers in the same city and was just revered when we lost him.
And I think another broadcaster that everybody, some of the youngsters obviously aren't going to remember, but Bill White, before he went to New York and then became, the commissioner of the National League, and still lives up in Upper Black Eddy in that area. And he did a terrific job with the Phillies while he was there. And of course, our neighbor right down here who's on the show a number of times with us, and that's a catcher that wanted to change the rules about running into a catcher, and he finally got it passed.
Who was that?
Tim McCarver.
Oh yeah, Tim McCarver. Oh yeah, but he doesn't like that rule. He really thought that they went overboard on that rule. He and I have talked about that a number of times. Yeah, you're right. He's right down there in Siesta Key with you guys down there in Sarasota. But Timmy was a little bit old school, and part of the thing was to dish out punishment when you were a catcher to get back at guys that that hit you. So he was a little bit old school about that. He also understands why they did it for the concussions and those kind of things. But I've talked to him a lot about that over the years, and I think I can honestly say he thought they went a little bit too far with it, and maybe they're trying to come back a little bit on that because it's gotten to the point where it's ridiculous. No, I don't think anybody knows what the rule is.
I was just going to say, they sort of, as they implemented it the first year or so, the umpires, I don't think, even understood it. I think they have made some progress along the way. I didn't see as many contested plays at home plate this year as I'd seen, last year and the year before.
Right. Well, and Joe Torre mentioned it I guess it was about 10 days ago during the World Series when they were talking about, what may turn out to be the Chase Utley rule, the same way they talk about the Buster Posey rule at home plate. That the plus is, he says, no catcher or player has been carried off the field on a stretch, on a litter or something, or had to be helped off with an incredibly severe injury since they did it. Well, so I think they look at it that way, that maybe it helped a little bit. I don't know.
Doug, jump in.
I was going to say, Chris, doing all the games over those years, can you enjoy the game as a fan when you just watch it, like a World Series, or do you kind of look at it and say, if I'm calling it now, I'd call it this way?
I can. Don will tell you, I've never been one of those people that lived in the past. I always went from year to year and tried to grow and didn't think, I saw Mays and Aaron play and they were better than the players that are here today. I always appreciated, I think, the great athletes we have in all sports now, and didn't try to look at it. It's so different now with the starting pitching the way that it is and the bullpens that have taken over. But to say that there's something wrong with that, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just, you watch a football game and every play there's 10 guys running in and out for down and distance, and They're always climbing over the boards in hockey, and they're always making substitutions at whistles in basketball. So I think things have evolved. I love the game. I've always loved the game, and I can still sit and watch it. And sure, I'll say things, and then they might say it right after me, which I think, well, that's cool, because I always thought I could do kind of a network type of broadcast anyway when I was on the air, whether it was appreciated or not. Some did, some didn't. So, no, I love the game, and I just, every night, we say it all the time. You'll see something in the game, say, I never saw that happen before. And you think, how many games could you, in that play in Toronto this year, in the play, when the catcher throws the ball back, Martin throws the ball back, it hits the guy's bat and a run scores. I never saw anything like that happen before, and I didn't know the complete rule on that until I heard about it. So I think that's one of the fascinating things of the game is you can always learn something if you want to.
Well, one thing about the game is it's very, very interesting and has gone down through the years. And most people, and you more than anyone else, that are listening to us right now across the country don't really understand Whitey Ashburn as far as the baseball broadcast is concerned. But how about the way he rehearsed? He prepared for those games. Harry, you tell the story, not me.
Well, Whitey was one of those guys whose mottos was, boys, my job begins when that first pitch is thrown. and you know what? He could get away with it. He had a great charm. I don't think you could do that nowadays. I think you have to prepare a little bit more. But, Whitey had a great feel for the game when it started. He had a great personality, he had a tremendous sense of humor. But the same guys that started the game were the same guys that finished on his scorecard, which is usually try to produce his post-game show when he would have all those cassettes of taped highlights, and he would try to recreate what was going to happen, and he had no idea who the hitter was at the time because that guy had not appeared on his scorecard, and then he would blame his producer, who many nights was me, that I got it wrong somehow. So I think that there are so many things about him, and we're laughing talking about him right now. He died in 1997, and we still talk about him, and we still laugh, and I think that's a heck of a legacy.
Wheels, who is that guy down in the bullpen? What do you mean he came up this afternoon?
Right, what do you mean? Or he'd have somebody come in, well, why doesn't this guy pinch hit? Well, why did they send him out about 10 days ago? Well, why'd they do that? It was that kind of thing. And you can't imagine that happening now. There's just, with all this Twitter or tweet or whatever the heck you call it, and blogs, and all these people that just sit around and their main goal in life is to sit and listen to successful people and hope that it's always been something that escapes me. But, now I'm starting to sound my age.
Well, let's talk about the present day, because one of the things that's obviously disappointing to me, and I know you, and we went through it back in '64 in those eras where there really weren't any clubs until finally Ed Snyder got the Flyers going, and that sort of ignited the city. But right now, you're pretty much back in the same area that you were back in the '60s. I mean, the Phillies have really struggled. The Flyers are struggling. The Sixers are struggling. The Eagles are struggling, and that's not the city that we knew.
No, the best team in town was Temple, and USF took them apart the other night. That didn't help.
We went up and saw that. Yeah.
I heard you guys say that, and I saw them take Penn State apart, my alma mater, in the first game of the year. So Temple do it to Penn State, and they're a pretty good team. I watched that game the other night, and that looked like a typical Florida team with unbelievable speed at skilled positions, and just kind of, I think Temple is a little bit tired at this point in the year, and they're a little bit banged up. When you have that kind of speed, it's hard to defense speed like that. So they were the most exciting team in town, and Don has a great point there that, we're in one of those kind of lulls right now as far as all of the teams go here. But it's still such a great sports town, and the fans do support the teams. They do love them. They get mad, they get upset, but they're very knowledgeable. And more than anything, it's an East Coast. I always said the sports are different, I think, from New England down to about south of Baltimore, maybe. And it changes when you get down. Maybe south of Wilmington, won't even put Baltimore and Washington in there, even though they're great sports towns. They're not as passionate as they are in the East. And we have those kind of fans here in all our sports. And Don will tell you that, You know, you can go boo your team, but don't let a New York fan come in and boo the Phillies or something, because all of a sudden the left and rights are going to be going.
Well, Doug, let's jump up to the present day and talk a little baseball, because the winter meetings have just ended. The Phillies had a relief pitcher that was traded away to Washington and wound up in fisticuffs. So let's get up to today.
Well, yeah, we didn't miss him after he left. Let me put it this way. Seeing Chase Utley and Jimmy Rollins and Cole Hamels and those kind of guys leave town was tough, because they're really good guys, and they played so well. They're great players and brought championships to our town. Seeing Papelbon go to Washington was like, thank goodness somebody would take him. You know, that was one of those kind of things. So, but that's another whole story. That's their problem now, and they've already experienced it firsthand, and now they have to deal with it. We had a great run. It was an unbelievable run for about 6 or 7 years. The ballpark was full. It was electric. It was loud every night. And probably hung on a little bit too long trying to make it happen again, and it didn't happen again. Everybody knows that. And we let the farm system go, and now we're paying the price for it. And the stand, the ballpark's half full, or say it's half empty, whichever way you want to look at it. But they have a plan now, bringing Andy McPhail in. I have not met Matt Klentak, but he's a new wave of type general manager. I'm 70 now. He's 35. When I first started, John Quinn was our general manager. He was about as old school as could be, and then Paul Owens came along, and he was in the era where the GM tried to outdrink the other GM and steal his player. So and you know what I mean, Don, about Pope, and I say that affectionately.
I'd say if you were on the beach and if you were on the beach in Clearwater at night,
that's what he did.
Had a lot of fun.
That's what he did. That's what they did in those days. And now it seems like they're all Ivy League grads, and they're all versed in numerology of stuff I have no clue. I still want to watch a guy for a year, and I can tell you if he can play or he can't play. But yet I can understand that life goes on, and you better get involved in this stuff and use it. But in my opinion, don't take the human being out of our sport. It's still the best game in the world to sit and watch somebody play and learn about what kind of person they are from other people or from the person themselves, and then decide what you're going to do. And use all your everything you can, all the variables involved. But I hear too much nowadays of, it's all numbers. It doesn't matter if you scout anymore or watch a guy play, and I think that's baloney. Doug?
How hard was it? And we got a little bit of just seeing on TV, Ryan Sandberg, resigning. Obviously took the losses very tough.
Yeah.
Did you get a chance to talk to him much right around that time?
I did. It's funny, and not funny, but I wasn't on the air that year. Mm-hmm. The year before that, his first full year as manager, and last year, and you lose track of it when you're not traveling and you're not around it all the time the way I had been for 37 years, and then you're really tuned into everything when you're with the team all the time. But I did know Rhino, and I did get to know him pretty well. We had played golf together a few times. I really liked him as a person. I really admired him, but I could see that it was wearing on him. Did we know? Nobody knew he was going to come in that day and resign. In fact, when we heard there was a press conference, we thought, did they just fire him? Why would you fire him right before the All-Star? Just wait till the end of the year if you don't want him around. So yeah, we were all very surprised, and some people want to say he quit. Whatever, however you want to word it. I just saw a guy that had just decided, look, they're not going to have me around at the end of the year. They're certainly not going to give me any players to make this thing any better. I've got guys in the clubhouse that are fighting me tooth and nail every day for what I want to try and do here. And he walked away from it. Now, you wouldn't think he would ever be able to manage again. I don't know that he even wants to manage again. But once you do something like that, you pretty much sealed your fate as far as what your future is in the game, I think. And he knew all those kind of things. But you know what? He doesn't have to worry. He's financially set. He's Ryan Sandberg. We're all the ones that maybe hold this against him.
Well, we had Larry Ball on with us a couple of weeks ago, and I talked to him. He made an interesting point that I had not thought of, all the times we've been around baseball. He said that there's a major, major difference between managing in the minor leagues and the way those players react to you as a manager, as opposed to being a manager in the major leagues, where you have a whole different atmosphere to work with.
Right, and that's the point I was making there about what it was like about players that were fighting him tooth and nail all the time. Even the he'd have problems with some of the young ones once in a while. And you think, hey, do you know who this guy is? The closest you're ever going to get to Hall of Fame is if you buy a ticket, when you go up there. And you're dealing with a living, breathing Hall of Famer right now, and you're treating him with that kind of disrespect. Now, could he have changed some things and done some things differently? He's very introverted in a lot of ways. He's much more extroverted than he used to be, Don. When he was a player, you know how quiet he was. His nickname was Gabby when he played because he didn't say anything. And he did have success in the minor leagues. And as always, when you talk to Larry Boa, he's going to make great points. And the reason Bo's back in the game is because Rhino asked him to be his bench coach. Larry Boa wasn't going to leave that job at MLB TV and go back on the field and be around these guys that drive him crazy, even though he tried not to let it happen. So that's why Bo came back out of respect to Ryan Sandberg because they were so close.
Well, what about Ruben Amaro now? I understand that obviously Ruben, as you said a minute ago, just hung on a little too long to the players that got him there. But I'm really surprised that he went from there to being a first base coach with the Red Sox.
Yeah.
What do you think?
That goes right along with me saying anybody knew that Ryan Sandberg was going to resign. When we heard that Ruben was flirting with them about being their first base coach, we all looked at each other, what's that all about? And then, it started to come out a little bit that made sense, and maybe he wants to manage someday, Don. And the best way to get a job as a manager is still, I think, to network and make yourself available. And being the first base coach and being a member of the Boston Red Sox organization and on the field is pretty visible. It's very, very visible, in fact, to be a part of that organization.
Right.
Now, you might get a Mike Matheny who comes out of nowhere, and the Cardinals organizations never manages and wins. Those kind of things can happen, too. I don't think there's a quote-unquote formula for a major league manager, but I think one of the ways is to stay visible. And I really believe that that's what Ruben's trying to do. And if it doesn't work out, as smart as he is, bilingual, with all his education and his other talents, Amaro doesn't even.
Stanford guy.
Right, he doesn't have to work in baseball. Even if he can be a corporate guy. But I think Ruben has this itch to be a field guy. The thing he's going to find out, and he knows it, he's going to work awful hard because those guys work hard. They throw every day. They're hitting fungos. They work hard, major league coaches. So it's going to be a lot different than sitting up in the press box at night and wondering why the manager made that move. Doug?
Chris, I was just out in Las Vegas last week, took a little walk between the Luxor and the Mandalay Bay, and your old friend, Don's old friend, Pete Rowe, is still there signing autographs. What do you think of his situation?
It's funny you should say that, Doug. He was in town last week. When Don was in town, the Eagles had a longtime trainer named Otho Davis, who was a wonderful guy that everybody knew.
Terrific.
Wonderful guy. And there's a scholarship named after Otho. Scholarship for kids, and also a Dick Vermeil Award for a doctor or a medical person every year. So anyway, they had the dinner last week, and they were doing a theme of 1985 Flyers or something. Villanova winning the national championship, those kind of things. And Pete was there as a speaker, and I was asked to introduce him. So I had about 15, 20 minutes with him alone before the thing started back in this VIP room, and we were just rolling on the floor laughing, telling stories that I can't tell you about stuff that went on when he was with it. They were some of the best 5 years I ever had in my life. Do I understand why he's going to have a problem getting in the Hall of Fame? Sure, but do I love him as a person? And was there ever a player that was more fun to watch? I don't know. I can't think of one that was more dedicated to the game. He made a ton of mistakes, probably continues to make them, but it's a long way back. First, he'd have to get reinstated by MLB, and then you have to go through this new committee they have where they just didn't vote Richie Allen in by one vote. He'd have to go into that thing and then go once every 3 years. So they're not going to put him in the first year just to show him, oh, we're not going to put you in. So he's a long shot to be in the Hall of Fame, but he's a Hall of Fame player.
I've told the story on the show a few times, not a lot of times, but a few times, and you remember how cooperative he was at times. I remember Win Elliott calling me the night he was going to break Stan musical record, and you might remember after the game they had the posters made up and all that. And Win called me up about 6:30, and he said, Don, get out and talk to Pete Rose. I want a couple of comments before he plays this game tonight at 7 o'clock. I said, When? I said, we don't have to go into the clubhouse at 6:30. I said, what am I going to do about that? He said, well, I really need it. I really need it. So I got a hold of the Baron. I said, well, call downstairs. Dan DeVito didn't come out in the hallway. Did about a minute and a half. I turned it over to win, but that's the kind of guy he was.
Yep. He's different. Pete had a great feel for what everybody else's job was too. And as long as you respected what he was doing and gave him his space and understood, where he was coming from and when you could approach him, when not to approach him and all, he really did try to help everybody. And that's a great story right there. And for me to say I'd be surprised, of course I'm not. That's the way he was. And it was just so much fun to be around him last week and just start laughing because we had a lot of fun. For 5 years, like I said, I was lucky enough to be around him and sit and talk the game with him and travel with him and watch him play is much more than anything. And what a player! If he had one hit, he wanted two. If he had two, he wanted three.
No question about it. The other thing is, and we'll let you go. We held you longer than I said.
That's all right. I'm not doing anything. I'm retired.
Well, I just think that a lot of people don't realize when you talk about Pete Rose how much he helped Mike Schmidt, because Mike Schmidt was a totally different player before Pete Rose got there than after Pete Rose got there.
He told Mike Schmidt when he showed up that he was in the league. And Schmidt, he looked at him like, wait a minute. Where'd you just come from? Didn't you just leave Joe Morgan and Johnny Bench and Tony Perez and all those guys in the Big Red Machine? And Pete, yeah, you're still the best player in the league. And you know what? That changed Mike Schmidt. You're exactly right. And then Pete, we were talking about this last week. Pete would have nicknames for everybody. And he nicknamed Mike Schmidt Herbie Lee.
Right.
And everybody said, why do you call him Herbie Lee? He says, look at him. He looks like a Herbie Lee.
Well, the other thing was that when he really changed visibly is when he came out with the wig on. I mean, people could not believe that Mike Schmidt came out there with a wig on.
Well, typical Mike Schmidt, he makes those comments about the fans up in Montreal. And then he says, well, I was talking to a guy from AP Montreal. No, Michael. AP is AP. It's Associated Press. It goes all over. Because he couldn't believe they knew in Philadelphia what he said. But that was, as you know, Don, from knowing Michael the way you know him, he's charmingly naive in a lot of ways, and always was, and probably always will be very innocent in a lot of the ways he was, and very, very shy. He's a lot like Sandberg,
right?
That kind of guy. He's introverted. So when Pete came over and did those kind of things, it really did change Mike.
How's he doing with the TV? He does weekends, right?
Yes, he does weekends. He's been battling the melanoma the last couple years.
Right.
He looked great this year. I'll be honest with you. I don't ask him much about it, but if you do say something, he says, I feel good. And he looks good. Melanoma, you guys live in Florida, and you know how serious the sun is, and how you got to pay attention to it down there in those kind of climates. And he's over there in Jupiter, and he's now he's gray, but he was a flaming redhead when he was young with that fair skin, and he got a pretty nasty case evidently. And knock on wood, he's doing okay right now, and you just hope everything's all right with him, because he really loves his life. He's much more extroverted now. He laughs a lot more. He teases. You can tease him, and he's fun to be around. And I never thought I'd say that about Mike when he was playing, that he'd be a fun guy to be around.
Well, I'll tell you, you're going back to what you said at the very top of the show, and that was that I never thought, once Larry Bowa got it, well, actually, I thought the Wild Thing and Larry were two of the best things on the baseball show, to be honest with you. The Wild Thing was very, very straightforward and honest. And I thought that they really did a great job. And unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, because Larry wanted to get back with Sandberg, as you said, but I thought they did a great job. I never thought he'd leave there.
No, well, he wouldn't have. I truly believe that he's going to, now maybe, I don't know, Terry Collins could have been enticing to him, because he and Terry Collins are very close from their Angels days. And I know how much Collins thinks of him. Maybe he could have been a guy to throw him back into the game. But it was going to have to be the perfect situation. Bo still lives here. Larry Bowa still lives here in suburban Philadelphia. and he's always going to make his home here, as he said. So when this opportunity came up that he didn't have to go. Heck, he'd been in New York, as you know, and then he'd gone all the way out to L.A. with Joe Torre for a few years, and now he's back in this area, and he really didn't want to leave this area. So it worked out great for him. And he's back. He and Pete Buchanan are very close. They're together a lot. In fact, Sandberg and Pete and Larry would be together a lot. So when Pete got the full-time job and asked Larry to come back and be his bench coach, Bo said, yeah.
Well, you know, I saw a picture in the paper yesterday, I guess. The Secretary of Defense at center field, I saw a picture of him. I hadn't seen him in years. He looks like he can still play.
He does. He's in great shape. And he runs 2 businesses in Philadelphia. He's very successful. And Gary has kind of Gary Maddox is who you're talking about, and he has kind of a regal way about him when he walks into a room.
Right.
When you look at Gary, people may not know who he is, but they look at him and think that's somebody. I wonder what that guy does, you know, because he's tall and he's thin and he dresses great and he has that walk. He's very confident when he. Gary's doing great, and that's nice of you to bring him up because he makes me smile when I think about him. Because every time you run into him, it's fun. It's like when he and the Sarge are together. When Gary Maddox and Gary Matthews are together, I'm telling you, all you do is belly laugh with those two.
And Sarge, he was the analyst on there for a long time, and he did an excellent job, too.
We had a lot of fun. In fact, there's another name that Pete gave. He gave Gary Matthews that Sarge was not Sarge until he came over to the Phillies in the early 80s, and Pete was still with us, and Pete nicknamed him that, and Sarge said, why are you calling me that? He said, you look like one of those nasty old drill sergeants in the Army.
Remember when he saluted the fans during the World Series? He turned around to the left field wall and saluted the fans, and ever since then, boy, it just mounted and mounted and mounted.
Well, he appreciates Pete doing that because I think he got a few bucks out of it, too, with some deals.
Well, what aspirations do you have now for the Phillies? How long do you think it's going to take them to turn things around? I mean, I wanted to mention Dallas Green, too. He's such a great guy. Talk about the country. Talk about the Pope. Holy smokes, between the Pope and Dallas Green, what a combination.
I tell you what, I had some education kid. It was. I was trying to figure out, am I going to make it into my 30s? The way I was going with being around that group in those days. But you know what? And John Vukovic is another guy who you can tell Doug about, and Bo and those kind of hard-nosed guys, and Timmy that you mentioned. I got really, really lucky to be around those kind of people. You learn how to be a pro in the game. You learn the right way to do things, and if you did something wrong, you found out really fast because they weren't afraid to tell you. And even though it hurts your feelings sometimes, I, to this day, appreciate it. As far as the Phillies coming back, I'm not in the prediction business, and this sport is kind of hard to predict. But they did some good things, Don. I think with the deal with the Hamels deal, we got some pretty good players, it looks like. And, you know, I'll tell you after I see them play, we evidently got some pretty good players back in that deal. Some other things, we've gotten a couple good number 1 picks the last couple of years that we haven't been able to do because of a variety of reasons of signing free agents and losing the number 1 pick. We have the number 1 overall next year, which you never want to have, but we do. We have a lot of money right now in the international pool. We're tops in that as far as being able to do some things. We have the number 1 pick in the Rule 5 coming up in the winter meetings. So there's some ways that you can get better, but until you get your pitching straightened out and get some kind of a rotation and get a thumper or 2 in your lineup, it's really tough to win.
Well, lastly but not leastly, and I'll let Doug get the closing question in, but just to give our listeners a little bit of an idea of Dallas Green.
Dallas? Oh, he goes right along with Pope and Boa and Book. And he's so loud, and he's got that real high-pitched yell when he yells at you. His nickname is Whispers because he's so darn loud. And he's huge. He's 6'5", and he's an imposing man. And he's just one of the greatest baseball people I've ever been around. He's had a tough few years. I think everybody found out when that horrible tragedy in Arizona, when that little girl was killed by that crazy guy, right, shooting the congresswoman that day. and she is one of the joys of his life. And I think it sucked some of the energy out of him, Don. He's never really been the same kind of guy, I think, as far as his energy since then. And he's had a few physical problems, but he's still Dallas Green, and he's still great to run into and to be around and to talk the game with and just to laugh about the old days, because he's a big part of the Phillies.
Doug, I'll let you throw the last question in, and we'll let Wheels go and have his dinner.
Okay, I was going to say, Chris, all the games you did, Don and I always talk about the longevity of announcers, particularly Vin Scully, and he's going to do hopefully one more year. I guess you've met him quite a bit just doing the games out in L.A.
Sure.
Any thoughts on Vin?
Well, he's just it's hard to just go quickly on Vin Scully. He's everything you think he is and more. He's such a great broadcaster, obviously, and he's the voice of a major franchise for so long. But I'd rather talk about what kind of human being he is. He's gracious. He always remembers people's names. He always is interested in what you're doing in your life and ask questions. And there are many things that I miss about not being traveling with the team anymore and being around the game the way that I was. And I've said that, and it's interesting you would bring him up. I've said that that's right at the top of my list, that I don't get to see and talk with Vin Scully anymore, because every time you'd go to Los Angeles, it was just a joy to be able to spend time with him, and he would always spend time with you. He never would big league people, just a wonderful human being, everything you think he is.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for spending a half hour with us. We really appreciate it. And I know with your busy social schedule and your banquets and all that, it's hard to get a hold of you at times.
Well, you come to me a couple times when I was doing golf tournaments and I had to stay for dinners. But it gets dark a little early now, so that's all over.
Well, thank you very much. It was terrific to reminisce and also look forward at the same time, because there were a great group of people that did a lot of great things, and as you mentioned, we had the opportunity to see them, to know them, and to be a part of the action, and it was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Don. And then, before I go, and it's been a pleasure talking to you and Doug. You've been blowing a lot of smoke at me tonight, which I appreciate, but you had a hell of a career in Philadelphia yourself. You were one of those voices that people will always remember, as far as especially baseball. You did other sports, but especially baseball. You're one of those guys that had a heck of a run in Philadelphia too, and you should be proud of it.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll do it again soon.
Thanks, Chris.
I'll see you in Florida. Nice to talk with you, Doug.
Okay,
Thanks,
take
Chris.
care.
Okay, guys.
When are you coming down?
I'll be there February 1st. I can't wait.
Oh my God, you waited until late. I'm going to go back to the Jersey Shore for Thanksgiving. Christmas leaving Monday, so I hate to leave this place.
Trust me, I'm getting closer and closer to an earlier departure.
Okay, thanks again, and we'll catch you.
All right, guys.